So cheesy. So cheesy. Hey guys, it is good to see you. I want to start by welcoming our campuses. We do every week. So for those of you in Kenosha today, or those of you watching in Racine or online in your pajamas, we welcome you, and we always welcome our Weekends on Wednesday service as well. A little bit of extra energy today. I love it, all right? So here's the deal. As we get started, I want to remind you very quickly about something we've been talking about the last several weeks, and that is we are literally just 8 weeks away from our 10-year celebration as a church, all right? Our 10th anniversary, being Great Lakes Church. And so if you want any details, you can go to greatlakeschurch.com/10 years. And it's actually important you go there if you've not gone there yet. It'll tell you the date, which is Sunday, September 29th, the last Sunday of September, which that particular week, no Sunday morning services, no Wednesday, a couple days before that on the 25th. All right, but you go here because you can get your tickets. Now, the reason we have tickets isn't because we want to be known as this church that has to be, very, very careful of who shows up. No, we want to know how many people are showing up so we can prepare. The tickets are free, and so you can reserve as many as you need. If you've got children, up until 5th grade, we are going to provide childcare. For those who are in middle school or high school, we invite them. We want them to be a part of this event because here's the deal. It's going to be a big, big thing. We're going to have extended time of music. We're going to have water baptisms. We're going to take some time to really look back at what God's done historically through our church because often we get these little glimpses. But at our birthday party, we're going to step back, see the big picture. And then what I'm most excited about is we're going to take some time to walk through the future of our church. All right, because I want you to know, now that we've got some buildings, we are not going to be lulled to sleep in our facilities. All right, we've got big things happening. We've got a future ahead of us, and I know that you have an opportunity to be a part of what God's going to do here, near, and far. Our board of directors has been wrestling with stuff for months, so it's at our birthday. I'm going to share it. If you cannot be there, we're not going to be putting the service online, so you just got to do your best to be there, all right? Cancel the vacation you've been planning to Hawaii to be at this event. All right, that's a lot of information to take in, but guys, I am super excited because our future is even better than our past. And we say that all the time, like the best is yet to come, and you'll find out why at our anniversary, why we really believe that. Now, 2 months ago, we started our summer teaching series called Unstuck. And this really is a series for everyone. And we try to do this each summer, right? To have this series that just impacts everyone. And the reason it's for everyone is we've all been stuck. Whether it's in our parenting or in our finances, or it's been in just a cycle of bad decisions, or we've been stuck in our thinking, stuck in our faith. And so the reason we're doing this series is I want you to know whatever you're stuck in life, it's possible to get unstuck. It's possible to change and to transform as a person. But that doesn't happen quickly, right? That doesn't happen overnight. If you have a car and you want to transform that car, right, that takes time. If you have a house and you want to transform your house and remodel it or completely redo the whole thing, that takes time. If you want to experience transformation in your body, that takes time. It's a lot of working out, a lot of eating a certain way. And so if you want for your life to change, well, come on, that's not going to happen overnight. That literally is a lifetime. And so it's possible to change, but it takes time. Now, I want to kick off really this talk today by showing you a picture. And I just want you to tell me, does anybody know where this picture is from? All right, this picture was taken in December of 1967. It was at the championship game between the Green Bay Packers and Dallas Cowboys. Anybody know what it was called? The Ice Bowl. Yeah, this picture was taken at the Ice Bowl, 15 degrees below zero. The average wind chill was 48 degrees below zero. Now, we've got a lot of Green Bay Packer fans at our church. In fact, at our campuses, even online by yourself. If you are a Green Bay Packer fan, I want you to put your hand up loud and proud. Woo! Now, keep them up. Do not put them down. Even at our campuses, keep them up because now I'm going to ask. I want you to keep your hand up if you can say with authenticity and you're completely honest that you would absolutely sit through 48 degrees below zero. All right, we have a couple hands still up. These are people who are not right in their minds, all right? We could argue, you could go ahead and put it down. We could argue that if you were in that first group that just went ahead and put your hands down, we could argue that you're really not a Packers fan. You can sell your jersey. You can stop going to any games or watching it on TV. Certainly don't tell people you are a Packers fan because you're not willing to sit in 15 degrees below zero, 48 below zero with wind chill, right? There's a lot of people at our church who they love hunting. And so they'll stop me in the lobby because they know I love to hunt. We'll get in conversations. And I've gotten conversations with people who say, yeah, I love hunting, but like, dude, if it's like 10 degrees outside, it ain't happening. And I could argue that they're not really avid hunters, right? Because I'll hunt in 10 degree weather. I'll hunt in 5 degree weather because a few years ago, I bought something called the heated body suit. The best purchase. Oh, you can laugh. It's like a sleeping bag with legs. But I'm going to tell you something. This is literally the best purchase I've made for hunting in cold weather. All right, I'm not joking with you. And it allows me to sit up in that tree, and I probably look ridiculous, but I don't even care because I am prepared. And there's hunters I know that they'll go out in the morning right before sunrise. Most people will do that, and 4:35, depending on the year, time of year, could be 6:30. But what will happen is right around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, they'll go in, for breakfast. Now, I would argue that's not really a hunter because I could sit outside in a tree all day long. No exaggeration. I could get out there at 4:30 in the morning and get in at like 8 o'clock at night. And people who've hunted with me know that I just have that ability. So I could argue if you can't do that, you're not really a hunter. And it's interesting because as we become more focused on things in life and we become more obsessed, or maybe we become more disciplined, or if we seem to have a higher level of passion or excitement towards something, if we spend money on certain hobbies and it's more money than other people, there is something in us that just automatically, naturally minimizes where other people are at. So if you claim to be a fan of a team, but you can't name, more than 2 or 3 players, well, you're not really a fan. Right? We could argue if you claim to love a certain band, this is your band, these are your people, but you can't sing more than 2 or 3 songs, well, then you're just being an extra. You're totally fake, right? And the reason I bring this up is because if you are a follower of Jesus, based on your temperament and how much you've grown or matured over the years, based on the steps you've taken towards spiritual maturity and the steps you've taken on your spiritual journey, it's pretty easy to look at someone else who seems to be at a very different place in their spiritual journey. Maybe they're less mature, maybe they're less disciplined, maybe they're less passionate, and to judge them accordingly. Right? This is why religion gets a bad name. This is why religion is often associated with words like judgmental and hypocritical and holier than thou. Religion seems to be attached to rules and structures and regulations. And it's fascinating because even the first followers of Jesus struggled with this. And of course, in 2019, we know we're not exempt from that, which is why it's very easy as a follower of Jesus, and we don't like to admit this, but it's easy to get stuck in this cycle of criticism and fault-finding and judging other people. And so what I want to do is I want to spend the rest of the time we have today speaking very specifically to those of you who are followers of Jesus, but you're stuck in self-righteousness. Now, I don't even like to use this term, self-righteousness, because I know what happens. We all kind of just turn off our brains and say, that's not me, right? I don't struggle with this. I know a couple people who do, but this isn't me. And I get that. But self-righteousness isn't just a religious issue. It's just a human issue. We all have a little bit of self-righteousness in us. And it surfaces from time to time, right, where we see in certain settings, I'm gonna feel a little superior to that person, right? We all kind of know the pecking order in the different environments we're in. From time to time, this attitude surfaces in us, right? I'm right and they're wrong. And we see ourselves because of that a little bit better, or we're maybe a little bit morally or ethically superior to another person. Or we talk to an individual in a condescending way, or we look at them and we have this intolerant attitude towards their behavior. None of us want the reputation of being self-righteous. That's why we don't think of ourselves as self-righteous. Well, especially when it comes to our faith. And this is why one of the greatest insults you can give someone who is a follower of Jesus is to call them a Pharisee. Now, in the first century, Pharisees were individuals who had a reputation for being zealous in their faith. I mean, they were God-fearing individuals. And yet what happened is over time, they earned a reputation for being hypocritical, narrow-minded, puffed-up bigots. Now think about this. 2,000 years ago, one of the greatest compliments you could give an individual was to call them a Pharisee. It was like a badge of honor. They loved God. They were passionate about their faith. They stood up for good and honorable and moral things. In fact, on one occasion, the Apostle Paul tries to establish his credentials by telling people he's a Pharisee. Here's what he says. He says, brothers, I am a Pharisee, as were my ancestors. He plays the Pharisee card for people to kind of trust him and to see he had some credibility. Jesus in Matthew chapter 5, he points to the Pharisees as examples of morality and examples of people who know how to behave and they've got their act together. These were very influential religious leaders who had a lot of impact on society. And yet over time, they somehow transitioned from being friends of God, who were zealous for him, they were banner carriers for his causes, to being enemies of God, who were regularly called out by Jesus because of their hypocrisy and their pious attitudes. Now let me ask you, how does that happen? How do you go from having this reputation for loving God to almost being anti-God? Well, the answer is happens accidentally, right? The Pharisees never intended to become who they became. Okay, it's a lot like having dinner at Denny's, right? No one actually plans to go there for dinner. You just kind of end up there and you're like, what just happened? You got a patty melt sitting in front of you, right? How do we accidentally go from having a sincere love for God and a true desire to honor him to becoming self-righteous and having a reputation for being pious and maybe holier than thou? Let me just give you 3 ways that it can happen, and certainly there are more, but let me just give you 3 of the biggest ways. The first is this. It happens through pride. You know, I've had people come and talk to me about all sorts of struggles and issues in their life. Anger, marriage problems, parenting issues, right? Bedwetting problems, I don't know. It's just all types of things. But one thing that nobody has ever come and said, hey, Dave, I want to talk to you about this, is pride. And that's because as human beings, we know pride exists, but again, we don't think of ourselves as being people of pride. Because what happens is we mask it, and we don't see it. So we'll say, well, I'm the expert on this, right? Or I know I can be hot-headed, or I like to be in control, or I'm assertive, or I like to speak my mind. I mean, we have all types of ways of masking it, but the truth is we all have pride in our hearts because pride is just simply self-obsession. It's a preoccupation with ourselves. When you worry about what other people think, that is pride. When you compare yourself to others, that is pride. When your self-worth is determined by your latest accomplishments, that's pride. When you have a difficult time celebrating the success of another person, that is pride. When you refuse to apologize for the wrong you've done, that is pride. When you can't see the wrong you've done, that's pride. When you can't acknowledge hurt, that's pride. When you keep God at a distance because you just want to live a life of independence, that is pride. And pride shows up in all sorts of areas in our life, and in our spiritual journey, one of the biggest ways that pride is evidence and the way that pride shows up is pride makes me the standard. In other words, if I'm passionate about it and you love Jesus, you should be passionate about it. Right? If I connect with God a certain way, well, you should connect with God that way. If I'm disciplined in time of prayer and I set aside time every day to pray and connect, well, if you love Jesus, you should do that as well. And so if I have certain beliefs about God and I've got certain preferences, man, people who really love Jesus, now we may not say it that aggressively, but that is pride. Several years ago, I had lunch with a guy who was telling me about mission work he was doing in Thailand, and he was doing great work. He was telling me about the sex trafficking and things that were happening, and he's getting worked up as he's telling me these stories and literally wiping tears. I mean, the guy is passionate, and he gets frustrated in talking to me, and he literally says this, he's talking to me. He just stops, and he says, well, here's the deal. It's obvious you're not passionate about this like I am. He says, you're just going to go to your comfortable home and back to Great Lakes Church and just live your life. And I looked at him and said, you're actually probably right. I'm actually not that passionate about what you're talking about. I said, but the cool thing is, you are. And the cool thing is, I'm passionate about Southeast Wisconsin, and you're probably not. And he goes, no, I'm actually not. And I said, here's the deal. This is how it works in God's economy. He gives us all different passions, different desires. We all come from different backgrounds, and he somehow uses it to expand his work. But pride says, if you're really devoted to Jesus, at some level, you should reflect me. You should have the same kind of gifts that I have and passions and the same kind of disciplines. So I want you to think just for a moment, I want you to imagine that your spiritual journey is like climbing a mountain. Okay, if you're climbing a mountain, where is the most dangerous place to be? Is it at base camp or is it towards the top of the mountain? Okay, this is not a trick question. Yes, it is at the top of the mountain. Okay, that's the most dangerous place to be. And in fact, every year on some of the tallest mountains in the world, some of the best mountain climbers, some of the most gifted and advanced climbers die. And sometimes it's, because of something like an avalanche or they die of a heart attack or something like outside of their control. But often the reason that professional mountain climbers die is because they're professionals. And as they got better and better, and as they got more advanced, what happened is they just kind of got a little bit cockier. And they're willing to take a little bit more risk. And so what will happen is, as the weather patterns are changing, those who are amateur climbers or maybe not as advanced, they get nervous and they say, this isn't right. We should kind of turn away. We should probably go back down and not try to make an ascent to the top. But professionals, people who've been doing it for a while, will often convince themselves, no, I can do it. I can do it. I'm more advanced than those people. Right? Or they'll come to a crevice in the mountain. It's obvious that there's been patterns and things have changed in like the conditions there. And so what'll happen is they'll convince themselves that, well, I can just get across, and they end up going down. The most dangerous place to be in life is just a little bit farther than everybody else, because that's where pride lives. And pride is not a small thing. Even as I bring it up, even if you could say, I got a little bit of pride, that's exactly what we do. I got a little bit of pride. I speed a little bit on the highway from time to time. Right? But the problem is, in the book of Proverbs, which was written by King Solomon of Israel, he actually writes, there are a handful of things that God hates. And the very first thing on that list is pride. It's haughty eyes. It's looking down on others. And what happens is pride surfaces in my heart when I have overcome something you have not overcome. Pride surfaces in my heart when I know or I understand something that you do not know and you do not understand. And so pride just naturally has this sense of superiority. And it is the number one thing God hates. Which means God would rather have you struggling with porn than with pride. Because pride can't see when I'm wrong. And pride can't acknowledge when I need help. And pride can't ask for forgiveness. Pride has this ability to blind us to our own faults and maybe how far we've come and exaggerate the faults of the people in front of us. Several years ago, we had a student ministries pastor at Great Lakes Church at our Kenosha campus. High energy guy, loved him. I'm not going to give you his name because he owns a gas station in the area. But I absolutely love this guy still to this day, enjoy being around him. But man, I often looked at him as he had to be one of the most immature individuals I had ever worked with. And the example that comes to my mind is he one time got a basketball hoop and he put it outside our operations center in Kenosha. He said, I want to create this place for kids to play ball. And I said, dude, I'm totally fine with that. But dude, we get a lot of wind. And so what I need you to do is anytime you're not playing with it, just go put it in the field. And he said, got it. But he always forgot. So he'd leave the basketball hoop up and I'd just say, dude, get rid of this thing. Please put it in the field when you're not playing with it. Oh, yeah. Well, he forgot one day. And sure enough, the basketball hoop fell on my car. Oh, man, was I fired up. And I said, bro, you've got to grow up. You've got to mature. And I was convinced he was the most immature student ministries pastor I had ever worked with. And that's because I forgot that when I was a student ministries pastor, there were 3 occasions on which cops had to show up because things got out of hand. I forgot that when I was a student ministries pastor and I brought kids to Six Flags, that I led the guys in taking off their shirts and creating this, what we called Naked Squad, and we ended up getting kicked out of Six Flags. I forgot on another trip to Six Flags that we brought a brand new girl with us. She was in the 6th grade, and somewhere in the middle of the day, we just weren't used to having her around, that we forgot about her, and she got disconnected, and we spent the whole day without her, and the only time we remembered her was when we were almost home, and somebody goes, "Where's Ellie?" Ellie who? But in my mind at that moment, he was the most immature youth pastor. He needs to grow up. He needs to be responsible. It is interesting how pride blinds us from how far we've come and wants to focus and exaggerate on what's right in front of us. Pride's a big deal. So let me ask you, is it possible that your pride has allowed you to become stuck in self-righteousness? And if you're like, I just don't know and I don't have any examples, when's the last time you were acknowledged you were wrong about something that maybe you believed about God at one time? Now, I'm not saying, well, no, I do believe something different than I used to. No, that you acknowledged it. That maybe you even had to tell someone, I apologize that I taught you that or I told you that. That was my own self getting in the way. When is the last time that instead of looking at and focusing on where someone was at in their spiritual journey, you looked and focused at where you were at in your spiritual journey, and that's what you concerned yourself with? When's the last time that you genuinely considered how far God has brought you and it fueled the grace you showed someone else? It is very easy to become self-righteous without ever wanting to be. It just happens accidentally. Another way we accidentally transition from having a sincere love for God and wanting to honor Him to becoming self-righteous is through segregation. Right? This is when we surround ourselves with people who are just like us, who think like us and talk like us, and they behave like us, and they vote like us, right? And just naturally, we kind of have this group, and people have their groups, but this is my crew. And one of the most sobering quotes I've ever come across is Martin Luther King Jr. said this in an interview he had. He said, "It is appalling that the most segregated hour of Christian America is 11 o'clock on Sunday morning." Here we are more than 50 years later, and churches are still segregated. And it's not just by color and by race and by demographic. We're segregated by all types of beliefs and opinions and preferences and music styles. And I kind of understand it, right? Because I say all the time, like there's so many churches in the Kenosha and Racine area. I mean, a couple hundred. And I say this, man, and I believe that like, dude, they're all equally valid, right? They're all equally great. Like, man, I realize God's doing a work in our community. But there's a reason I'm pastoring Great Lakes Church. It's a little bit more fun, right? A little bit more grace-filled. We laugh a little bit more, right? We show a little bit more compassion. But this is how I think, right? We got a little bit better music. Our people are a little bit nicer. Right? Pastor's a little bit easier on the eyes. I mean, we have all these things that now obviously, there's a reason why we choose the groups we choose. And someone from another church is going to have their reason why they've chosen that, right? It's human nature. We love to feel a little bit special and a little bit exclusive. And it doesn't happen intentionally, it just kind of happens accidentally. I wrote down, everybody loves this feeling of exclusivity. I think about when I lived in San Diego, the area I lived in, many of the communities, including the one I lived in, had gates on them, so gated communities, and you just kind of felt special. So that thing opened up, I was like, yeah, I live here, right? Universities do this. They always try to create this special feeling so you feel exclusive, saying I go to Harvard or Yale, right, or Princeton or Gateway, like this is my place. Companies do this. You got Apple, right? Nordstrom's, Yeezys. It's like, man, these are my shoes, right? We've got all of these different things that make us feel exclusive, and that is absolutely fine for companies and for universities and for communities. But there is no place among that for followers of Jesus, which is why Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." Come to me, all of you. Everybody. And now I'm not going to burden you with more rules and regulations, and I'm going to make you feel stupid, and I'm going to find little digs to shame you. No, I will give you rest. Jesus invites everybody to follow him. There is no room for exclusivity and segregation in our thinking. So let me ask you, is it possible that unintentionally you've surrounded yourself with a lot of people just like you, and just somewhere in there it's kind of led to a little bit of self-righteousness? And if you struggle answering that question, I'll just straight up ask you, who are you friends with that completely think and believe and behave differently than you and most of your friends? When's the last time you fully engaged in a conversation and listened to somebody who you knew you were in a complete disagreement with and you didn't try to rebuttal them and get back at them and get a little... When's the last time you just were genuinely concerned? Like, tell me what you think. When's the last time that instead of judging someone who irritated the life out of you, you made the decision to get to know them personally? Let me put it a different way. Who can sit next to you and worship God in settings like this with full acceptance and grace on your part? Where if you knew their story, you still can say with authenticity, I do not feel superior to them. Like if you knew the person sitting next to you had had multiple sex partners in the last month, could they sit next to you without any judgment? How about someone who's stolen something in the last week? How about someone who's covered from head to toe in tattoos and piercings? How about someone with no tattoos and no piercings, but khakis and a button-up? Like, is that cool that they sit next to you, no judgment? How about an alcoholic? How about a Trump supporter? How about a Democrat? How about someone who years ago sexually abused another person? That if you knew that, you could sit there and say, this is an issue they have to work out with God, but I am not the judge. How about someone who's been divorced multiple times? Someone who's addicted to porn? A card-carrying member of the NRA? How about a gay couple? Someone with HIV? Someone who didn't express themselves at all in the musical time of worship? How about someone who really expressed themselves during the musical time of worship? Who can sit next to you in settings like this and worship God? And if you knew their story, there would absolutely be full acceptance and grace. So I don't think any of us want to be self-righteous. It just kind of sneaks in there. And then just a third way that we accidentally transition from having this sincere love for God and wanting to honor him to becoming self-righteous is through legalism. And legalism is any attempt to help God out with extra rules and regulations. Right? It's different rituals or ceremonies, or again, rules that we're trying to help God out. We're trying to protect that person from going too far. That's what legalism is. Helping God out by creating extra rules and regulations. Now, before I say anything else, I want to be super clear about this. There is nothing wrong with extra rules and regulations that are self-imposed. If you want to add something to your life as a way of kind of protecting a weakness in your life or building a strength in your life, if you want to create certain disciplines and choose to limit freedoms in your life, that is a good thing. Not long ago, I spoke for a buddy of mine who pastors a church in another state, and as I was kind of working out some of the last-minute details, I called him knowing he was going to be out of town, and I said, hey, bro, where am I going to be staying when I'm speaking at your church? And he said, hey, my wife and one of my kids is at home. He says, you can just stay with them. Nothing wrong with that, right? I know his family. I know his wife well. But I've got rules and regulations that I put in my heart that Bible didn't tell me, Jesus didn't tell me I had to. I do. I call it wisdom. And so I just say, I'm not going to do it. I don't feel comfortable with that. I don't want to put myself in a situation where I'm, in a house alone with another person's wife and their small kid. I'm just not going to do it. So I ended up staying at a hotel. And again, nobody told me I had to do that. Sometimes we have to create rules and for ourselves that we just say, this is what I'm going to live by. And what's interesting is we can look back over the last 100 years, and what happens is followers of Jesus created all types of rules, but they tried to get everybody to live by them. In fact, my grandparents' generation lived by the mantra, I do not smoke, I do not chew, and I do not go with girls who do, right? And so I was like, stay away from smoking and stay away from alcohol because that might lead to an addiction. Some people even believed, if you love Jesus, don't wear makeup because that will draw attention to yourself. There were people who believed you shouldn't dance because dance could kind of lead to sex, kind of get sexual. And now I've seen some of you dance, and you certainly shouldn't dance, but it has nothing to do with sex, right? Some people would say, well, years ago, don't participate in Halloween. It's the devil's holiday, right? Don't go to movies because of language and violence. And here's the thing. There are people, even at Great Lakes Church, who maybe still have some of these, and it's fine as long as it's self-imposed. And we have progressed so much since then. But it is still easy to judge people based on habits they have or their church attendance patterns or the way they parent the kids or handle their money or the way they use their free time or the way they vote. Now, to be clear with you, it is true that often following Jesus does require us to give up something or change something or add something to our lives. But do you realize that so many times when somebody's called to change something or add something or edit something in their life, Jesus was speaking to an individual and he wasn't speaking to a crowd? And what he was doing was putting his finger on the issue in their specific life or their specific, what they were going through. And so often we take something Jesus said to an individual and we make it a blanket statement for everyone else. The Apostle Paul puts it simply, says, make it your goal to live a quiet life, minding your own business and working with your hands, just as we instructed you before. Then people who are not Christians will respect the way you live and you will not need to depend on others. Be very careful that you don't take personal convictions and personal preferences and styles and force them on other people. We do it all the time. Don't believe that if you don't get your child dedicated or baptized, or if you don't go through certain classes or confirmation, that somehow God is going to be upset with you. We don't do this to other people because you don't know what people have been through and you don't know what they've experienced and what worldview they have and how it's been shaped. We need to be very, very careful that we don't put our preferences on other people. And to kind of flip the script for just a second, we need to be careful that we don't become a Pharisee to the Pharisees, where we look at people who are a little bit self-righteous or judgmental and kind of see ourselves as above them. Thank God I'm not like them. Now let me end today by telling you a story, and then what I'm going to do is connect the dots for you, and we're going to close. All right? Some of you remember back in 1982, Chicago area, there were 7 people who died after taking Tylenol capsules. Apparently, the Tylenol capsules were laced with cyanide and led to tragic deaths, right? The first of those deaths was a 7-year-old girl who had a cold. She goes to her mom, needs some help. I need to feel better. So her mom gives her Tylenol, and a few hours later, she's dead. Then there was a postal worker who died after taking Tylenol. And then his brother and sister-in-law, they were so distraught, and they were just feeling sick, so they took Tylenol, and then they ended up dying. And so at the end of this kind of tragic set of instances, 7 people are dead. And so police launched this investigation, and they realized what tied everybody together was that they had taken these extra strength Tylenol capsules. And that somebody had gone into various stores and they had opened them up and they had somehow laced it with poison. And so when this was discovered, police took drastic measure. Well, one of the things that happened is the way even prescription medication and different, even over-the-counter stuff is packaged change as a result of these Tylenol murders. But one of the more drastic measures that police took is they went into the streets of Chicago with loudspeakers and they faced them towards homes and they said, do not take your Tylenol. Do not take your Tylenol. And from neighborhood to neighborhood, do not take your Tylenol. And this is what happens to the message of God's love when we attach religion to it. We take something that people desperately need, something that can take away pain and provide hope, something that can bring freedom, and we poison it with religion. And so the very thing that people need ends up hurting them. And they move from a prison of self into a prison of religion. Now again, this is an easy talk for us just to dismiss, and we say, well, somebody else needs it, because when we picture imposing preferences on others and we imagine self-righteous people, here's what we imagine. We imagine the extremists. God hates fags. God hates lukewarm Christians. America's doomed. Come on, that's not any of us. But I do think all of us have the capacity to hold up invisible signs in our hearts and to harbor invisible attitudes towards people who are not like us. And so the greatest way for us to fight self-righteousness is simply to carry a mirror. Metaphorically, to carry a mirror and to just say, God, I'm going to focus on myself and my need for Jesus. I'm going to remind myself regularly of the people I've hurt and the people I've taken advantage of. I'm going to remember regularly that I have blind spots in my life. 2,000 years ago, Jesus is surrounded by his disciples. He's telling them a story, and he talks about a Pharisee who's praying, and he's pointing out to God all the things he does great and all the things he stays away from. And then in the corner of the same room, there's another guy praying, someone who's very aware of their own condition. These are the words of his prayer. "O God, be merciful to me, for I am a sinner." If you want to be unstuck from self-righteousness that you may not even know exists in your heart, this is the prayer to pray. So let's close by praying that. Heavenly Father, I pray that you would give us the wisdom to know what to do with what we just heard and the courage to do it. And we end today by praying the prayer prayed by a sinner 2,000 years ago. "O God, be merciful to us, for we know that we are sinners." In Jesus' name, amen.